Let's start with a short session of meditation, concentration meditation, calm abiding meditation, and then we'll do another session later, at the end of this session. So remember the motivation that you generated earlier today in the morning. Take a few moments to bring up in your mind whatever positive, altruistic intention you are able to that feels right for you, feels comfortable for you. So it could be bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened, to help all living beings. Or if that seems too far away, too high, then just feeling the wish to be of benefit to others, to the world, as much as you can in your life. And then wishing that this meditation will help to bring that about, will help you to be more helpful to others. And make sure you're in a good position for meditation, both comfortable and relaxed, but also conducive for meditation with your back straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes left partially open if you're able to do that. Let your breath flow in and out in a natural, steady rhythm. Try to put aside any thoughts or any other experiences that are not related to what we're doing here, this meditation. Thoughts are like clouds. They come and go in our mind, just like clouds come and go in the sky. They're not permanent, they're transitory. They're also not solid, and they can't really harm us, so there's no need to be afraid of thoughts or worried about them. So, both now and during the meditation, when you notice thoughts in your mind, try to not be caught up in them, follow them, go with them. Instead, notice them, then let them go, put them aside, and come back to your meditation object, which could be the breath, an image of the Buddha, or some other object that you wish to use. So just keep coming back to that object again and again. Try to keep your mind stable, like sitting still on the object as long as you can before it wanders away. And then try to notice when it has wandered away as soon as possible, and then bring your mind back to your object. Do you notice your mind calming down more? Being able to stay more on the object? Good. Yeah, usually at the start of a retreat, especially if you've come from the outside and you were probably really busy before you came here, making arrangements, traveling here, and so on and so forth, then the first day or so, there's still a lot of thoughts left over from all the things you had to do. But as time goes on, those sort of settle down and you get more into the retreat. But if the retreat is only 2 days, then doesn't give you that much chance for it to settle down. Still better than nothing. So I just thought to start to see if there are any questions. Like you put up your hand this morning. Did you get your question answered, or is it?
I did a little bit. I guess the big challenge I've been experiencing is drowsiness, lethargy, the feeling like I'm going to fall asleep, and trying to work on antidotes to that.
So you did get an answer?
Yeah, I had a few that were, I'm working on trying to imagine lots of light, filling the body with light, and then remembering death.
Death. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I'll get into some other antidotes today for sleepiness. We'll look at this list of 5 hindrances and how to deal with them.
Just one, getting back to this morning's definition of meditation.
You mean concentration?
Oh, well, yeah, concentration. Okay. Yeah, maybe that's where I'm stumbling. I'm just thinking in terms of my understanding correctly, but concentration. It's a form of concentration meditation. Is that right? Or,
well, concentration, as defined here, is just a mental factor, and it can be there whether you're meditating or not. For example, when people are working or studying or painting, at that time, one might have concentration on what one is doing. But then, in the context of Buddhism, we attempt to cultivate, to develop that quality of the mind. It's kind of a natural quality of the mind that everybody has. But we try to cultivate it by focusing on a specific object, ideally one of the recommended objects in the teachings, the breath, the Buddha, and so on, and then training our mind to stay with that object for longer and longer periods of time. So in that sense, we can say it's concentration meditation. It's a type of meditation to develop concentration. And then that's, kind of a more narrow definition of concentration than just the mental factor of concentration. I hope I'm not making it too complicated. But,
no, actually, my question was about the Tibetan word gom. So I don't know how is that different to, same as, different, complementary to what we're doing right now, or something I shouldn't even be concerned about?
Well, the Tibetan term for meditation is gom, and that has the meaning of familiarize, become familiar. And so, that's something we deliberately work on cultivating. But there are kinds of meditations other than concentration meditation. The Tibetans divide meditation, at least in the Gelugpa tradition. I don't know about other traditions, but in the Gelugpa tradition, they divide meditations into 2 groups, 2 categories. One is concentration meditation. They're, training our mind to focus on just one single object. The other main type of meditation is called analytical meditation. For example, meditating on the precious human life, meditating on impermanence, meditating on death. So in that kind of meditation, we're not focusing only on one thing, like the breath or the Buddha, but it's like contemplating, reflecting, thinking, analyzing. So our mind is more active, more busy. We still have concentration in the sense that we should be, if you decide I'm going to sit down and meditate on impermanence, and then after 5 minutes you decide to meditate on compassion, and then the next 5 minutes, I think I'll meditate on emptiness. We should still, stick with one topic or one object. But our mind is more active. There's discursiveness, thinking going on. And that's meditation, but it's not considered concentration meditation. So, yeah, and then there's other types of meditation as well. For example, when we do practices, and we visualize, for example, the 35 Buddhas, and generate the 4 opponent powers, and do purification of our negativities. So that could also be called meditation, kind of. But again, it's somewhat different than the other two. Lots of questions. I saw you first.
So I'm still wondering about mindfulness and concentration and how the two relate to each other.
Yeah, so I didn't forget, and I was going to talk about it, so I might
I'm
as well do
sorry
it now.
bring it up.
Okay, so concentration then is when we focus our mind on one object, and then when we talk about concentration meditation, we're trying to train our mind to stay on that one object for longer and longer periods of time, eventually as long as we want, hours and so on, without any distraction. And then mindfulness, in the context of this type of meditation, mindfulness is one of the most important factors for developing concentration. And there's an explanation of that on the top of page 5 of the notes that you have. We're kind of skipping over some material, but it said that one of the faults or problems or obstacles to concentration is forgetfulness, meaning forgetting our object. Okay, so that's when, we start off watching the breath or focusing on the Buddha, and then our mind is going somewhere else. We're thinking about something we have to do next week or something we did last week. So we forget our object. I think of it like holding something in your hand. Okay, so what we're trying to do is hold our mind on the object, or hold the object in our mind, depending on how you want to think of it. We're trying to keep our mind connected with the object, focused on the object. That's like holding the object. Forgetting the object is like dropping it, losing it. Okay, so that's something we want to avoid. It happens, of course, again and again, but it's something we should try to avoid. And mindfulness is the opposite of forgetfulness. So mindfulness, it's actually in Tibetan and Sanskrit and Pali, the word for mindfulness means memory or remembering. It has the same meaning. And so it's a mental factor, and there's an explanation of it here. Mindfulness is a mental factor that has 3 features. First, its object is something familiar, something we are familiar with. For example, the breath. We're familiar with the breath. Number 2, its subjective aspect is not forgetting the object. That means, so when we are able to stay on the object, hold the object, keep the object in mind, at that time, it's mindfulness that is responsible for that. That means mindfulness is there, it's active, it's doing its job. Okay. And then number 3, its function is not allowing the mind to be distracted to other objects. Okay, so as long as mindfulness is present and it's working, it's doing its job, then our mind doesn't forget the object and go elsewhere. It keeps the object. It holds the object, doesn't drop it. Okay, so when that's happening, for those few moments, those few precious moments during a meditation session, when the mind is on the object, not somewhere else, on those moments, it's mindfulness. Mindfulness is a mental factor that is responsible for that. So mindfulness is very important to be able to develop concentration, because it stops the mind from forgetting the object and going elsewhere. Okay. So that's the meaning of mindfulness in the context of this kind of meditation, and any kind of meditation as well. Also, when you're doing analytical meditation, you're doing meditation on impermanence. So mindfulness would also enable your mind to keep stay focused on that topic while you're thinking about it, meditating on it, not forgetting it. And it's also used in other contexts as well. For example, they talk about mindfulness of our precepts. Okay, some of us have taken vows or precepts, like the vow to not kill. That's the first of the precepts. So if you've taken that precept, we need to be mindful of that, not forget. In other words, don't forget that you took that vow. You made a promise to the Buddha, you're not going to kill. And so that would be functioning. For example, if a mosquito lands on your arm, you might even get as far as having your hand up about to smash it. And then you remember, oh, wait a minute, I took a vow not to kill. Put your hand down, let the mosquito fly away. Okay, so if we take precepts or vows or make promises like that, we need to remember them, not forget them. Sometimes we do forget, like during this retreat. It's not really a vow, but we're supposed to be keeping silence. So sometimes you forget about that, and you find yourself talking to somebody. Oh, I'm supposed to do that. Okay, so when we have some kind of practice to do or precept to do or rule to follow, we want to be able to remember that and not forget it. So mindfulness plays that role as well. So this meaning of mindfulness is somewhat different than the kind of popular meaning of mindfulness, as in mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and so on. So their mindfulness is explained as paying attention to or being aware of whatever's happening moment by moment in a non-judgmental way. So I'm not sure if that is the actual meaning of mindfulness in the traditional teachings. There's another term for that kind of practice, which is bare attention. Bare attention means just being aware, paying attention to what's happening moment by moment by moment in a non-judgmental way. So that kind of practice is more accurately called bare attention rather than mindfulness, the traditional meaning of mindfulness. But it's a little complicated. There's so many different terms, and sometimes they're interpreted in different ways and so on. So is that helpful? Is that clear? So mindfulness is part of our practice for developing concentration, a very essential part of our practice. If we don't have mindfulness, we won't be able to develop concentration. Our mind will be forgetting the object all the time and not concentrating on it.
Today we did walking meditation, fast, slow, and medium walking. Were we supposed to concentrate on our object while we were walking, and how should we position our hands? And what was the actual goal of that? What are the advantages or benefits? And
Yeah.
just curious.
Well, I think walking meditation is used in different ways in different Buddhist traditions. As I mentioned just this morning, the way I learned it was you focus on your feet. So it is a practice that helps us to be mindful, aware in the moment, not scattered and so on. But the way I've learned it, you don't focus on the breath or the Buddha. Instead, you focus on your feet walking. So that was what I had suggested that you could do. And I said, if anyone has learned some other way of doing walking meditation, then you could use that. I mean, one benefit of walking meditation is, for most of us, it's hard to sit many hours, right? You can't. There's a limit to how many hours we can sit and meditate. So it's a chance to learn meditation, keep our mind in a more meditative state when we're walking. And in fact, the Buddha spoke about, this is more in the context of the foundations for mindfulness, the Satipatthana. He said that we should try to be mindful whether we're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. Those are the four main positions our body is in during the day. So the idea is not to think that meditation is only something we do while we're sitting in a meditation position on a meditation cushion, but something we try to do in all activities, working and so on. So doing walking meditation is a kind of bridge towards being able to be more mindful in our daily life. So when we're doing other activities, we're more active, our eyes are open and so on. Learning to be mindful, learning to keep our mind in a good state, even in those situations.
So during breathing meditation, when you're concentrating on your stomach, going in and out, the problem is I can't breathe fast enough to hold my attention because there's like in between the breathing. And then that's when my attention wanders. So then I'm like, breathe again, but then I'm controlling my breath, right? So I know you're supposed to like wait, but then it takes so long before I need to breathe again. So my attention's gone.
Well, yeah, this is an issue. You shouldn't try to force yourself to breathe faster, just let the breath be natural. And in fact, your breath will probably slow down because when you're more active physically, like running, your breath will speed up. But when you sit down and calm down naturally, your breath is going to slow down, and you should let it slow down. So then how to keep the attention, the concentration on the breath. That's why it's good to have a physical place where you're concentrating. It could be the abdomen. This is one place, watching the abdomen moving in and out. It could also be the nostrils where the air is going in and out. So I think probably for most people there is a pause in between one breath and another, and also in between the inhalation and exhalation. Okay, so there's a little gap there, a pause there. So I think what you should do is just continue to pay attention at that place, whether it's the belly or the nostrils, just stay focused there. And if you're really attentive, your mind gets really quiet and attentive, you'll probably notice there's things going on there. There's sensations there, even when the breath isn't coming in, going out. So you just have to learn to not let your mind run away just because it's a pause in between breaths, It's a question of learning and training, but eventually you'll be able to do that. So the ideal thing is then to just let the breath be natural, in and out. It will be probably slow. Let it be slow. And let there be a pause if there needs to be a pause. But still try to keep your attention there, at that, wherever it is you're paying attention. And speaking of the breath, I wanted to say something. So if there are other questions, I'm sorry, maybe we can take care of them tomorrow. One of the things I wanted to mention today was the importance of having a sense of appreciation of your object of meditation. Meaning, well, I heard this story from Ajahn Brahm. That's what brings this up. He said when he was meditating in Thailand with Ajahn Chah, his teacher, there was another monk in the community from France, and they were all taught to meditate on the breath. They were all meditating on the breath. That was their object. And this French monk didn't like the breath for some reason. He had some aversion to it, like resistance and aversion to meditating on the breath. And he didn't deal with that. And so, it grew. It got worse and worse. And finally he got to the point where he was just totally fed up. He didn't want to meditate anymore, so he left. So it's important to try to avoid that. Try to avoid negative attitudes about our object, whether the object is the breath or the Buddha or whatever, It's important to like the object, because if you don't like the object, your mind isn't going to want to stay on it, right? So you need to have some good feelings about it. And was it you? I think you last night mentioned boredom. Yeah, so it's quite possible that boredom will arise, whether you use the breath or any object that we use, even if it's a very elaborate, like tantric mandala, with all these beautiful deities. It could still get boring after a while because it's the same thing, hour after hour, day after day, month after month, year after year. I mean, anything we meditate on can become boring. But we have to try not to let that happen, because if our mind becomes bored, boredom is a kind of aversion. It's a kind of, I'm tired of this. I don't want this anymore. Okay, so if that starts happening and you don't deal with it, it could grow and get worse and worse and worse. And pretty soon you don't want to do it anymore. You want to run away. So I think it's important to find some way to keep your mind interested and happy, enjoying your object. So when I was doing this retreat, I could see myself getting bored sometimes with the breath. So what I did, this is just what I did. You can find your own way of doing it, but just to think about, what is the breath? Is it something useless? Is the breath useless? No. If we don't have the breath, we don't exist. We die. Right? The breath is one of the most crucial things for us to be alive, to exist, to go on living one moment to the next. If we stop breathing, we die within a very short time. So the breath is something pretty important, very precious. Okay? So thinking about that, getting to realize how precious it is, how important it is, gave me a sense of, wow, how wonderful it is that I'm able to breathe in one breath after another. It means I'm alive. I still have this precious human life, able to do all the things I can do with my life and so on. So that's one thing that I found helpful. And then another thing is like I was saying last night, if you really pay attention to the breath, then you can see that it isn't really boring, because each breath is different from the one that came before and the one that came after. Each breath is unique. There's no two breaths that are the same, right? And also within each breath, as the breath is coming in and then as it's going out, there's different things happening, different sensations. So if you really focus and pay attention to the breathing or whatever object it is, you'll find that it's not really the same from one moment to the next. It's changing. Okay, so that can keep your interest. I mean, it's not as exciting as watching an action-packed Hollywood blockbuster, sure. But then if you think about the benefits of focusing on the object and developing concentration. So let's look at letter D on page 2, because it said that one of the obstacles to developing concentration is what's called laziness. And laziness here specifically means, I don't want to meditate. That reluctance, that resistance, that lack of enthusiasm to meditate. Now, that may not happen so much in the beginning, because often when we first start meditating, we're really excited and enthusiastic, but that could be because of having expectations. Yeah. But after a while, when you don't get what you hoped for, wished for, and it starts to be difficult and challenging, and then laziness can set in. Laziness is like when you hear the gong or the bell calling you to meditation, your heart kind of sinks. Oh no, not again, another session. You might even start feeling aversion for your meditation cushion. Yeah, just the sight of your meditation cushion can be, oh no. So we don't want to get to that point. So we have to watch out for that. So to counteract laziness, this dislike for or lack of enthusiasm for meditation, it's recommended that we understand the good qualities or the benefits that we can get from learning concentration, training our mind to concentrate. Okay, so this comes from the Lamrim teachings. So the first is, this is specifically about calm abiding, that very high level of concentration. So number one says, with calm abiding, when you've achieved calm abiding, your mind is filled with delight and your body is filled with bliss. So you're happy in this life. So that's what I mentioned this morning, that people who've achieved that level of concentration say it's just the most exquisite, wonderful, fantastic experience, like nothing you've ever had before. So if we haven't yet experienced that, we have to just take that on faith. But I think you can start to get a little taste of that. Like I said, if you are able to keep your mind focused on the breath, even for just one breath, or a few breaths, a few moments, a few minutes, if you really are able to keep your mind calm, you might notice, if you pay attention to how it feels in your body, how it feels in your mind, you can get a little sense of peace and calm that we don't normally have in our daily life. So if you watch, pay attention, you can start to see the possibility, And then, of course, if we're able to continue meditating, continue keeping our mind concentrated for longer and longer periods of time, that feeling of calmness and peace and bliss will grow even more. So I think concentration is naturally blissful, right? And you may get a taste of that when you're able to concentrate, like I said, on something you enjoy, painting or working or running. People talk about the bliss of running. So when our mind is focused, it is sort of naturally peaceful, satisfying, enjoyable. So even in this life, we'll get benefit from concentration. And then number two, because of pliancy. So pliancy is sometimes called serviceability. That doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Anyway, it means there's physical pliancy and mental pliancy. Physical pliancy, they say your body just feels like cotton. It's so light, and you could do anything with your body. You could just use your body for anything you want. And your mind feels very light and also kind of very blissful. So that's called pliancy. And that comes when you achieve calm abiding. The full force of pliancy comes then. But they do say that you start to get little tastes of pliancy as you go along, as your concentration increases. So when you have pliancy, you can turn your attention to any virtuous object of meditation you choose. So your mind is very easy. You can easily think of your teacher or the Buddha or compassion or love. Your mind is very flexible. And then you can put it on virtuous objects. And virtuous objects are naturally good for you, good for our mind, as opposed to, thinking of an object of aversion or greed or something like that. So it's easy to put our mind to things that bring peace and happiness and bring us closer to our goals, liberation and enlightenment. And number three, you overcome distraction to wrong objects meaning things that aren't helpful for us, but, make more suffering. So you're not always creating non-virtue. And any virtue you do is very powerful. Virtue is the cause of happiness. Non-virtue is the cause of suffering. Okay, so with better concentration, we're able to keep our mind away from causes of suffering and more focused on causes of happiness. Number four, based on calm abiding, you can achieve good qualities such as clairvoyance and supernormal powers. You can read other people's minds. You don't need your cell phone anymore. You can just, connect mentally and know what's going on with them. No, I'm joking. But yeah, there are these powers that can be achieved on the basis of calm abiding, concentration. But these powers are not the real goal. They're not what we're supposed to be aiming for, but rather they're more of a side effect, but they are useful, especially for bodhisattvas, because a bodhisattva wants to help sentient beings, and to be able to help sentient beings most effectively, you need to understand what's going on with them. And if you don't really know what's going on in people's minds, you're limited in how much you can help them. So bodhisattva will develop these supernormal powers and then use them in their work to benefit sentient beings. And then number 5, based on calm abiding, you can achieve the realization of insight knowing reality, meaning emptiness, with which you can quickly cut the root of samsara, meaning you can remove the root cause of all of our suffering and enable us to be free of samsara and then help others to be free. So if you're not so familiar with the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist path, some of these things may not make a whole lot of sense to you. But the more we understand the Buddhist path, then the more exciting this is. Wow, I can do all these things with concentration. So the ideal thing is to get familiar with these benefits of calm abiding, develop the sense that, yes, it's a good thing to have calm abiding concentration. And then we have enthusiasm to work for it. And then if we put our time and energy into practicing it, eventually we will achieve it. And then we'll have all these benefits. And they say once you have pliancy, that quality of pliancy, there's no more laziness. You have no more reluctance to practice meditation. You're just happy to sit down and you don't even want to stop, even when the dinner bell rings. Okay, so let's look at some of the other hindrances. So on page 3, this box, this chart, letter H, the 5 hindrances to concentration and their antidotes. So I probably won't get through all of these today, but I'll start and can continue tomorrow. So why do we have such a hard time keeping our mind focused, concentrated on our object of meditation? One reason is because our mind is afflicted by these hindrances. These are some hindrances. There's others as well, but these are said to be the main ones. And so it's useful when our mind wanders. Okay, we notice our mind is wandering. It's useful to kind of look where it's going. Where is it going when it wanders away from the object? What is this other object that we're going to, and why? Why does our mind go to that object? Okay, so if we look at that, investigate that, and this is something each one of us has to do on our own, because each one of us has our own mind, and our own mind works in its own way. So we have to get to know our mind and what are the main hindrances. So we probably have all of these at least sometimes, but we need to be able to recognize them. And when we do recognize them, there are antidotes, things we can do about them. So the first hindrance is sense desire, or it could also be called attachment to sense objects. So sense objects are objects of our 5 senses: visual objects, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, bodily sensations. Okay, so we have the tendency, strong tendency, to have desire for, attachment to objects of our 5 senses. We like to look at beautiful things. We like to hear nice sounds. We like to smell nice odors. We like delicious tastes. We like pleasant bodily sensations, nice feelings in our body. And it's not that it's wrong to have these experiences, to see beautiful things and so forth. It's not that it's wrong, but the problem is we tend to get attached to them. and have clinging, craving. We want more and more, and we don't want to separate from, and so on. So the problem isn't those objects themselves, but it's our attitude about them, attachment to them, desire for them, clinging, craving. That's the problem. So there's a explanation in that first box of what this is. It says, finding sense objects attractive, exaggerating their qualities, or projecting extra qualities onto them to the extent that it no longer relates to reality. So this is the function of attachment or desire, in this case, sense objects. Okay, so probably the best example is another human being we find attractive. Because they say that kind of desire is the strongest one. Attachment or desire or craving for other people, other human bodies, whether it's the opposite sex or the same sex. So when we see some attractive person, what happens in our mind tends to get kind of focused on that. That's very easy to concentrate without making effort. Our mind just goes, focuses on that object and looks at it again and again, thinks about it again and again. And what happens, not deliberately, I don't think we do this deliberately, but our mind tends to build it up and make it even more attractive than it is. Yeah, sort of decorating it with additional nice qualities, maybe adding things that aren't even there, trying to, avoid looking at not so nice aspects of it, just focusing on the good things and avoiding the bad things. Does that sound familiar? And then on top of that, the mind tends to have the view that object will bring me happiness, will bring me pleasure. I want it. I want to be as close as I can. I want it to be there as much as possible. I want to own it, to possess it. Of course, that's not such a nice thing when it comes to another person, but still, this is what we want. We want to own it, that object, because we think it's going to make us happy. So then we get into all kinds of, how to get close to that person, how to get them to like me, feel the same way about me that I feel about them, and so on and so forth. It gets very complicated. Okay, so it's not that it's wrong to get into relationships and friendships and so on, but the problem is when there's exaggeration, when there's unrealistic expectations. This person's going to be there forever. They're going to make me happy forever. They're never going to change, never going to go away. All these wishes that we have. So it happens with people, but it can also happen with other kinds of objects as well. Clothing or jewelry or shoes or devices or food, drinks, and so on. Anything. Traveling, Meditation even. We can even get attached to meditation. So almost anything can be an object of our attachment. And this is what attachment does. But here, it's particularly talking about objects of our five senses. So attractive visual objects, sounds, and so on. So during our day, during our life, we tend to generate attachment to the sense objects that we encounter. And then this can become a hindrance in meditation. So we try to sit down, focus our mind on an object like the breath or an image of the Buddha, but it doesn't stay there very long because a lot of the time our mind is going to objects that we experienced in the past beautiful objects, pleasant experiences, or future ones, hoping, fantasizing, future encounters with pleasant objects. Or if some pleasant object happens in the present, like if we hear music, for example, somebody's playing music, not here, but wherever you are at home. So maybe your neighbor starts playing music, and if it's some kind of music you like, then your mind will go to that. And it's very hard to stay concentrated. Or your neighbor's baking some pastry, some cake, a very beautiful smell is coming into your nose. So again, the mind can get all caught up in that. So I think that probably most of the time when our mind gets distracted during meditation, most of the time it's because of this attachment. Attachment is past pleasant objects, or future imaginary ones, or present ones. That makes sense? So it's normal. Don't feel bad. Don't beat yourself up about it. But still, we need to recognize it. This is a problem. It takes our mind away from our meditation object. Okay, so antidotes to attachment are impermanence. Impermanence is the changing nature of things. The Buddha said it's really, really important to be aware of impermanence because it's a reality, it's the truth of things. Our bodies, the bodies of others, our minds, the minds of others, all the material things in the world around us, whether they are natural things like trees and mountains, or human-made things like buildings, cars, and so on, all of these things are impermanent, which means they are changing every single moment. They are not the same from one moment to the next. We don't see this with our eyes. We know it from science because everything's made of particles, and those particles are not sort of frozen, fixed, unchanging things. They're moving, changing all the time. So nothing stays the same from one moment to the next. And as things change, they get older. They degenerate. They deteriorate. And eventually they die. Okay, so that's what's going to happen to our bodies and the bodies of others. Even the most beautiful body in the world isn't going to stay that way forever. It's changing every moment, and eventually it's going to be an old body and then a dead body. So that's the reality of things. And when we have attachment kind of goes against impermanence. When we have attachment, we want things to not change, to not go away, to not die, disappear. We want things to be always the way they are right now, this moment. So it's not in accordance with reality. It's unrealistic. So the more we get in touch with impermanence and accept impermanence, understand impermanence, our attachment will cool down. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to have attachment to something that, doesn't stay the same from one moment to the next and isn't going to be there anymore after a while. So that's one antidote to desire and attachment. Another one is to see the object in a more realistic way, because when we have attachment to an object, whether it's a person or anything else, we tend to only focus on positive things, attractive things, and ignore not so positive things, mistakes, flaws. So we sort of build up this image of the object as being 100% wonderful and perfect and fantastic, which probably isn't realistic either. Everyone and everything has faults, has flaws, disadvantages. Nothing is perfect. So it can be useful to remind ourselves of the imperfections. Not to go to the other extreme and feel hatred and aversion and disgust towards the object. That's not the point. But just to see it as not so wonderful and fantastic as we think. And that will also help to cool down our attachment. And so we don't have a whole lot of time now to go into this, but I was thinking maybe we have 15 minutes left. We could do a meditation on impermanence, just to see how that could be helpful for counteracting attachment and desire. So this meditation is not the same as the concentration meditation. This will be more of an analytical meditation, a thinking meditation. But it's good to know how to do this, because if you find your mind carried away by attachment when you're trying to meditate, and it keeps running after that object of attachment, then it can be helpful to remember impermanence, remind yourself of impermanence. And if you're very familiar with impermanence, just within a couple of minutes or seconds, you might be able to cool your mind down, bring your mind back down to earth, and be able to get back to your meditation object. Okay, so make yourselves comfortable. And again, try to keep your back straight, but at the same time, let your shoulders be relaxed rather than tense and tight. Try to have your body as relaxed as possible. So if there is any tension anywhere in your body, see if you can let it go. You can imagine that it melts, flows away out of you, and sinks into the earth below, or just disappears in space. And then for a few minutes, just be aware of the breath, the gentle rhythm of the breath flowing in and out to calm your mind down in case there are thoughts going through your mind that are not related to what we're doing here. So we can start to become aware of impermanence by using the breath itself. So the breath itself is impermanent. It's changing all the time, every moment. So when we breathe in, we're breathing in certain molecules of air, oxygen. And that goes into our lungs, our body, and gets changed. And then the air we exhale, breathe out, is probably different than the air we breathe in. In very subtle ways, not visible to our eyes, but there's probably different chemicals in our exhalation of breath compared to the inhalation. Also, there are different sensations taking place within each inhalation of the breath. Different things happening in our body, in our nostrils, in our chest, abdomen. And the same when we breathe out. There are different sensations each moment as we are exhaling. And just for a few moments, be aware of your breathing coming in and going out, and try to have this additional awareness of the impermanent nature of the breath, the changes that are taking place each moment, each nanosecond as we are breathing. And then, then expand your awareness to the rest of your body. So try to feel the whole of your body. And we probably have a natural instinctive sense of our body being very solid and big and strong and powerful. We don't normally see our body as something that's changing every moment and actually quite fragile. But think about how this seemingly solid body at a very subtle level is made up of tiny particles, cells, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. And those tiny particles are not frozen and fixed and always the same. They're moving and changing every moment. And because they are moving and changing every moment, that means your whole body is moving and changing every moment, but in a very subtle way that we don't normally see. But we can still think about this and understand this mentally. So think about that and try to get a sense of it. Feeling for how your body is not so solid and fixed, static as it appears to be. Our mind is also impermanent, not in the same way as our body, because it's not something physical. It's not made of molecules and atoms, but it's changing in the sense that it's a stream. It's like a stream or a river of momentary mental states or mental events. So each moment, there are actually different things happening in our mind. These can be thoughts, memories, perceptions, emotions, fantasies. So each of these experiences only lasts a moment. It's a bit like a bubble that comes out of a Coca-Cola bottle. So it arises, it lasts a moment, then it bursts or disappears, goes out of existence. But there's another one immediately following it. So our mind is this ever-changing, ever-flowing stream of mental events. It's never the same from one moment to the next. And just as this is true for us, it's also true for others. So all the people sitting in this room around us, around you, they have bodies and minds, and their bodies and minds, just like ours, are changing every moment, not the same from one moment to the next. And the same goes for all the things in the world around us, both the human-made things like buildings, this building that we're sitting in, all the other buildings here, all the buildings in all the towns and cities everywhere in the world, roads, cars, so all the human-made things, but also the natural things, trees, hills, mountains, rivers, lakes, oceans, rocks, plants, the whole earth itself, the stars, sun, moon. All these things are made of particles, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. And they don't stay the same from one moment to the next. They're always changing, constantly changing. So ask yourself if it makes sense to have attachment, clinging to any of these things. So it's best to meditate on impermanence again and again so that it becomes just part of our awareness. And also keep it in mind during our day. There's signs of impermanence happening all the time. Like right now, the weather's changing. Days are getting shorter. It's getting colder. Leaves are starting to turn yellow and brown and fall off the trees. And before long, it's going to be winter and snow is going to fall and so on. So, I mean, this isn't something that just happens all at once from one day to the next. It's happening slowly, day by day, moment by moment. Change is just a natural part of us and our world and everything in it. So it's really helpful to keep that awareness in mind. It's a good antidote to attachment.